The room fell silent as Captain Olivia Martinez stepped onto the massive circular platform. The space around her was filled with beings from 24 different worlds, all staring down at her from their raised seats. Some had multiple eyes, others had skin that changed colors, and a few didn't even seem to have heads in the traditional sense. This was the Galactic Conclave, the ruling body of this sector of space, and today was humanity's introduction to the wider universe. "The human may approach the center," boomed a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Olivia walked forward, her boots making soft tapping sounds on the polished floor. She had faced down storms on Mars and navigated asteroid fields, but nothing had prepared her for the weight of 24 alien species watching her every move. "We recognize Earth as a new spacefaring civilization," said Counselor Zrik, a tall being with blue skin and what looked like coral growing from its head. "We welcome you to the community of worlds." "Thank you," Olivia said, trying to project confidence. "Earth is honored to join the conclave and looks forward to peaceful cooperation with all species." From the upper tier, a harsh laugh cut through the formal atmosphere. It came from a reptilian being with scales that shimmered like oil on water. This was Ambassador Kral of the Kithari, known throughout the galaxy as Master Warriors. "Tell us, human," Kral said, leaning forward. "How many ships does your fleet contain?" Olivia straightened her back. "Earth currently has 7 interstellar vessels." The room erupted in sounds. Some were clearly laughter. Others were the various species. Equivalents. Even the translator embedded in Olivia's ear couldn't keep up with all the comments and jokes being made. 7, Kral repeated, making sure everyone heard. "The Kithari Empire deploys 7 ships for a simple border patrol. Our home defense, fleet numbers in the thousands." Shriek raised a hand, quieting the room. "The number of ships is not as important as the peaceful intentions behind them." "Peaceful intentions don't defend borders," Kral shot back. "Show us your flagship, human. Let us see what Earth considers mighty." Olivia nodded to her communication officer who stood at the back of the platform. A hologram appeared above them, showing the UES Pathfinder in all its glory. The ship was sleek and functional, about half a kilometer in length with visible weapon ports and engine arrays. More laughter filled the room. The Kithari representative actually stood up, pointing at the image. "That is your most powerful vessel? It would not survive 10 minutes against even our smallest cruiser. Look at the primitive weapon mounts and those engines. Are they still using reaction mass?" Olivia kept her face neutral, though she felt her cheeks getting warm. The Pathfinder was Earth's pride, the culmination of decades of work and scientific breakthroughs. To hear it mocked so openly stung worse than she had expected. Ambassador Susan Wright stepped forward to join Olivia. With her silver hair and dignified posture, she commanded respect, even in this strange gathering. "The Earth fleet may be small," Susan said calmly, "but we have much to offer the conclave beyond military strength. Our scientists have made remarkable advances in medicine, agriculture, and sustainable energy." "Yes, yes," said a gaseous being that floated in a containment field. "All newcomers bring something of value, but you must understand, humans, that there are threats in this galaxy that require strong defenses. The conclave cannot waste resources protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Lieutenant Daniel Blackwood, standing at attention behind Olivia, whispered, "They're sizing us up, Captain, and finding us wanting." Olivia nodded slightly. She had expected some of this. Humans were the new kids on the block, and new kids always got tested. The rest of the meeting went no better. When it came time to assign Earth its official territory, within conclave space, the humans were given a small cluster of stars near the edge of the sector. It was a clear message. These stars were far from major trade routes and had few habitable planets. "Sector 12G will be your administrative region," Counselor Zrik announced. "It is and appropriate for your current level of development." Kral did not bother hiding his satisfaction. "Perhaps in a few centuries, when you have a proper fleet, you might petition for a more central location." When the meeting ended, the Earth delegation returned to their temporary quarters on the massive space station that housed the conclave headquarters. Admiral Frank Nelson was waiting for them, his weathered face tight with anger after watching the proceedings via secure feed. "So that's how it's going to be," he said as the door closed behind them. "They think we're primitives." Susan sank into a chair. "It could have gone worse, at least we're in. We have a seat at the table." "A seat at the children's table," Blackwood muttered. Olivia removed her formal jacket and draped it over a chair. "They judge us by the size of our fleet and nothing else. They don't understand Earth or humans at all." Admiral Nelson walked to the viewing port, looking out at the massive alien ships docked around the station. Some were so large they blocked out the stars behind them. Compared to those Leviathans, the Pathfinder did indeed look tiny. "Let them underestimate us," Nelson said finally. "It wouldn't be the first time in human history that the big guy didn't see the small guy coming." Susan studied a data pad showing their assigned sector. "This region they've given us is sparse, but it does have some interesting features. There's a nebula that might contain rare elements, and 3 of the star systems have planets in the habitable zone." "They're throwing us scraps," Blackwood said. "Then we'll build with scraps," Olivia replied. "That's what humans have always done." The next day, the Earth delegation formally accepted their membership in the conclave and their assigned sector without complaint. This seemed to surprise many of the alien representatives, who had expected protests or even begging for a better position. As they prepared to depart, Kral approached Olivia directly. The Cathari towered over her, his scales shifting color in what the human interpreter indicated was a pattern of amusement. "Your acceptance was gracious," Kral said. "Perhaps humans are wise enough to know their place in the galaxy after all." Olivia smiled politely. "We're just happy to have a place to start. When you encounter your first space pirates or resource raiders, call for Kettery assistance," Kral said. "We might be able to spare a ship or two to save what's left of your fleet." "That's very kind," Olivia replied, "but I think we'll manage." As the humans boarded their shuttle to return to the Pathfinder, Admiral Nelson looked back at the assembled alien diplomats watching them leave. "They have no idea what's coming," he said quietly. "No," agreed Olivia. "They don't." Within hours, the Pathfinder and its escort of 6 smaller vessels broke orbit and set course for Earth's new frontier, leaving behind a conclave that had already mostly forgotten about the insignificant newcomers and their tiny fleet. 6 months passed as humans settled into their assigned sector. They built small outposts on 2 planets and several mining operations on resource-rich asteroids. The conclave largely ignored them, with only occasional check-ins from minor officials. Most alien species had already forgotten about the newcomers with their 7 small ships. Chief Engineer Angela Weber stood in the command center of Outpost Delta, looking at the strange readings on her screen. The station was positioned near the edge of human space, monitoring the vast emptiness beyond their small sector. "There it is again," she said, pointing to a blip that appeared and disappeared. "That's the 3rd time today." Science Officer Paul Carter adjusted the settings on the long-range sensors. He was young for his position, but his mind worked in ways that made other scientists jealous. When normal people saw random data, Paul saw patterns. "It's not sensor ghosts," he said firmly. "Something's out there using some kind of cloaking technology, and it's big." Captain Olivia Martinez studied the readings. In the 6 months since the embarrassing conclave meeting, she had grown even more determined to prove humanity's worth. "Send the data to the Pathfinder," she ordered, "and contact Admiral Nelson. I want confirmation before we alert the conclave." 3 days later, their fears were confirmed. The mystery signals were coming from an approaching armada of ships, hundreds of them, all moving steadily toward human space. "They're called the Scourge," Admiral Nelson explained in the emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. "We pieced it together from old conclave records they shared during our membership process. They're a hive mind species that consumes all organic material on planets they conquer." Ambassador Susan Wright looked pale. "Have you notified the conclave?" "Yes," Nelson said grimly. Their response was less than helpful. The Admiral played a recording of his conversation with Counselor Zreek. The blue-skinned alien looked annoyed at being disturbed. "Yes, Admiral, we are aware of unusual activity in that region," Zreek said dismissively. "If you feel threatened, you may wish to evacuate your settlements." Your sector is, regrettably, not of strategic importance to the conclave as a whole. When the recording ended, the room was silent. They're going to let the scourge hit us first, Olivia said finally. They're using us as a buffer. Nelson nodded. The Cathari representative was even more blunt. He suggested we abandon our ships, since, and I quote, they would make no difference anyway. President Laura Bennett, who had led Earth through its first steps into interstellar politics, stood up from her chair. Though she was in her 60s, she carried herself with the energy of someone half her age. If the conclave won't help us, we'll help ourselves, she declared. It's time to implement Protocol Trojan Horse. Everyone in the room straightened at those words. Protocol Trojan Horse had been developed as soon as humans realized how dismissive the galactic community was of their capabilities. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Wright requested an emergency meeting with the conclave. When she was finally granted an audience, only half the council members bothered to attend. The Cathari representative, Kral, looked particularly bored. The Scourge fleet has entered our sector, Susan announced. We estimate over 200 warships. That got their attention. Several councilors began talking at once. 200? Shriek asked, suddenly interested. Are you certain of this number? Yes, Susan confirmed. And they've destroyed one of our monitoring outposts already. Kral leaned forward. Where are your vessels now? Have you begun evacuation? No, Susan said calmly. Admiral Nelson has positioned our fleet at the border of our territory. We intend to defend what is ours. This announcement was met with silence, then something like pity from the assembled aliens. Ambassador Wright, Shriek said gently, while we admire your species' courage, 7 ships cannot hope to stop such a force. The conclave recommends immediate evacuation of all human settlements. We appreciate your concern, Susan replied, but we will handle this our way. However, we would like permission for our vessels to move freely through conclave space if needed for tactical purposes. The council granted this minor request, seeing it as a way to ease the humans' inevitable retreat. Several councilors even arranged for emergency response ships to handle what they assumed would be a flood of human refugees. What they didn't know was that Protocol Trojan Horse was already in full effect. In a secure command center aboard the Pathfinder, Admiral Nelson met with his captains. Among them was Commander Lisa Alvarez of the UES Stingray, a small vessel that had been designed specifically for stealth operations. The Scourge fleet will reach the border in 6 hours, Nelson informed them. Commander Alvarez, your team's intelligence has been invaluable. What have you learned about their communication systems? Lisa stepped forward. Her ship had been secretly monitoring the approaching enemy for days, using cloaking technology that even the conclave didn't possess. Their ships communicate using quantum pulse signals, she explained. But thanks to Greg Thompson and his team, we've cracked their basic command codes. Greg Thompson, a communications specialist with a gift for language patterns, had spent every waking hour analyzing the strange signals. They're coordinated but highly centralized, Greg added. Cut off the command ships and the smaller vessels get confused. First Officer Benjamin Scott, Captain Martinez's right hand, pulled up a holographic display of their battle plan. We've identified 3 command vessels, he said, pointing to the largest ships in the Scourge formation. They're well protected in the center of their fleet. Conventional tactics would never reach them. Good thing we don't use conventional tactics, Admiral Nelson said with a slight smile. Is everything in position? Yes, sir, Olivia confirmed. All 7 ships are at their assigned coordinates. The conclave is monitoring our positions just as we expected. Several alien vessels have taken up observation points just outside the battle zone. They've come to watch us fail, Lisa said bitterly. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget, Nelson replied. Commence Operation Thunderstrike on my mark. The human officers returned to their ships. The tiny human fleet formed what seemed to be a hopeless defensive line at the edge of their territory. On the conclave observation vessel, Kral watched with a mixture of pity and fascination. Other alien representatives had gathered as well, drawn by the spectacle of the doomed human stand. See how small their ships are compared to just one Scourge cruiser, Kral commented to a fellow observer. This will be over quickly. The massive Scourge fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, their black ships shaped like jagged blades against the darkness of space. They outnumbered the human vessels nearly 30-1. The primitive humans don't even flee, another alien remarked. Perhaps they don't understand the threat. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Scourge ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their black hulls absorbed the light from nearby stars, making them look like moving shadows in space. The front line of their fleet fired the first shots, bright beams of energy streaking toward the 7 human vessels. On the Conclave observation ship, Kral watched with folded arms. "The humans aren't even trying to dodge," he commented. "Perhaps they have frozen in fear." The alien observers waited for the energy beams to tear through the tiny human ships. Instead, something unexpected happened. The beams hit what looked like invisible walls around each human vessel, energy splashing and dissipating like water hitting glass. "Shield technology?" one observer gasped. "But their ships are too small to generate shield barriers of that strength." The human ships remained in position, appearing to absorb attack after attack without damage. Then, as if responding to a silent command, they began to move. Not away from the danger, but toward it. "What are they doing?" Kral asked, leaning forward. "Now, suicide runs?" The UES Pathfinder led the charge with Captain Olivia Martinez at the command center. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, no panic evident despite being massively outnumbered. "Shields holding at 92%, reported the defensive systems officer. "Energy absorption at optimal levels." Olivia nodded. "Lieutenant Blackwood, prepare to execute Maneuver Delta 6 on my mark." Daniel Blackwood's fingers flew over the tactical controls. "Ready, Captain. Now," she ordered. The 7 human ships suddenly changed direction, moving in what appeared to be random patterns. But there was nothing random about it. Each ship was following a carefully planned route that brought it tantalizingly close to Scourge vessels before darting away. On the Conclave ship, the aliens watched in confusion. "What kind of battle strategy is this?" one asked. "They dart in and out like insects, but they barely fire their weapons." Kral tilted his head. "They're trying to draw the Scourge ships out of formation. A basic tactic, but useless against such numbers." The Scourge fleet began to shift, groups of ships breaking off to pursue the nimble human vessels. This was exactly what Admiral Nelson had planned. "Phase 1 complete," he announced from his command ship. "The Scourge is dividing their forces. Begin Phase 2. The human ship suddenly reversed course, heading directly toward specific Scourge vessels. At the last possible second, they released what looked like small missiles. "Those projectiles are too small to cause significant damage," an alien observer noted dismissively. But the missiles didn't explode. Instead, they attached themselves to the hulls of the Scourge ships and began to glow. On the bridge of the UES Stingray, Commander Lisa Alvarez watched her tactical display with satisfaction. "Quantum anchors deployed and active," she reported. 27 enemy vessels successfully tagged. The quantum anchors were a human invention, devices that disrupted the energy field around a ship, making it temporarily unable to move or fire weapons. The affected Scourge ship suddenly went dark, floating helplessly in space. "What just happened?" Kral demanded, standing up now. "Those ships are completely disabled." Even as he spoke, the human vessels began firing precision shots at the immobilized Scourge ships. Their weapons were surprisingly powerful for such small vessels, cutting through the disabled ships with surgical precision. Greg Thompson, monitoring communications aboard the Pathfinder, reported, "Enemy command frequencies are going crazy." "They've never seen this technology before." "Of course they haven't," Admiral Nelson replied. "We developed it specifically for this encounter." The battle continued for 3 hours. The human ships never stayed in one place long enough to become easy targets. They moved with incredible speed and precision, using their quantum anchors to disable Scourge vessels before destroying them with concentrated fire. By the time the Scourge fleet finally retreated, 27 of their ships had been destroyed. The humans had lost none. On the Conclave observation vessel, there was stunned silence. "Impossible," Kral whispered. 7 small ships against over 200. The other observers were equally shocked. They had come expecting to witness a massacre. Instead, they had seen something unprecedented, a tiny fleet successfully defending against a vastly superior force. After the Scourge retreated to a safe distance, Ambassador Susan Wright requested another emergency meeting with the Conclave Council. This time every member attended. As you've now seen, Susan began, humans are capable of defending our territory. However, we believe the Scourge will return with reinforcements. They are not known for accepting defeat. Councillor Zreek, who had been watching the battle from a secure location, seemed unusually respectful. Your defense was impressive, Ambassador Wright. The Conclave is willing to consider providing assistance against this common threat. How did your ships withstand such firepower? Krall asked directly. Our sensors indicate your vessels are much smaller than ours. Susan smiled politely. Earth has had to develop efficient technologies due to our limited resources. Our shield systems convert enemy energy weapons into power for our own systems. This was only partly true, but Susan had been instructed to reveal only certain information. The full capabilities of the human fleet remained classified. We request a formal alliance against the Scourge, Susan continued. They will target the rest of Conclave space once they're done with us. The Council agreed to send a small fleet to assist the humans. What they really wanted was to observe human technology more closely. Back in human space, Admiral Nelson met with his captains to prepare for the next encounter. They underestimated us once, he said. They won't make that mistake again. The next wave will be larger and more coordinated. The Conclave ships will be here in 3 days, Captain Martinez noted. Do we show them everything? Nelson shook his head. Only what we need to. Phase 3 of Protocol Trojan Horse remains classified, even to our new allies. On her ship, Commander Lisa Alvarez was studying the battle recordings. The Scourge adapted to our tactics within the first hour, she observed. They learned quickly. So do we, replied First Officer Benjamin Scott. That's always been humanity's greatest strength. True to Admiral Nelson's prediction, long-range sensors soon detected a much larger Scourge fleet approaching human space. This time, there were over 500 ships. The Conclave sent 40 vessels, led by Krall himself. He had specifically requested this assignment, driven by curiosity about the humans he had so recently mocked. When his ship arrived at the human command center, Krall was surprised to see how calm everyone was. These people were facing an enemy, 5 times larger than before, yet they acted as if victory was certain. Your reinforcements are welcome, Admiral Nelson told him with what seemed like genuine appreciation, though you should know that the battle plan has already been set. I am here to observe and assist, Krall replied carefully. The Conclave is interested in your defensive capabilities. Nelson smiled. Then you'll want a good view of what happens next. As the massive Scourge fleet approached the border of human space, Krall saw the 7 human ships take up positions again. He still couldn't understand how such a small force could hope to stop hundreds of enemy vessels. What am I missing? He wondered aloud. Watch carefully, Nelson advised him. The real human fleet is about to reveal itself. Admiral Nelson led Krall to the main viewing area of the command center. The large screen showed the approaching Scourge armada, hundreds of black ships moving as one giant force. The 7 human vessels looked tiny in comparison, like pebbles against a mountain. Your bravery is admirable, Krall said, trying to sound diplomatic. But surely you see the futility of this situation. Nelson checked his watch and smiled. 3 minutes until they enter our territory. Then you'll understand. Across human space, hidden commands were being sent through quantum communication channels that the Conclave couldn't detect. In the distant corners of the sector, 7 massive objects that had been disguised as small mining outposts suddenly began to move. On the bridge of the UES Pathfinder, Captain Olivia Martinez received confirmation. All carriers report ready, Admiral. Carriers? Krall asked. I see no carriers. That's the point, Nelson replied simply. The Scourge fleet crossed into human territory. Their front line opened, fire immediately, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons. The 7 human ships activated their shields again, absorbing the attack. Phase 1, Nelson ordered. The human vessels executed the same swift, unpredictable movements they had used in the previous battle. The Scourge, having studied these tactics, adjusted their formation to counter them. They've adapted, Krall observed. Your previous strategy won't work twice. It's not meant to, Nelson answered. It's just a distraction. Krall was about to ask what he meant when new signals appeared on the tactical display. 7 massive objects were approaching from different directions, moving at surprising speed for their size. What are those? Demanded Krall. The real human fleet, Nelson said with quiet pride. The objects were revealed to be enormous carrier vessels, each one at least 5 times the size of the original 7 ships. As they approached the battle, their outer shells, designed to look like asteroid mining stations, fell away. Dr. Samantha Taylor, the lead scientist behind Earth's weapon systems, stood beside Nelson. The camouflage worked perfectly. The Scourge had no idea they were there. Krall stared in disbelief. You hid these from the Conclave surveys. We declared them as mining outposts, Nelson corrected. No one asked for details and no one bothered to check. You all assumed we only had 7 ships. The carriers took up positions surrounding the Scourge fleet. They were massive, heavily armored vessels with dozens of launch bays along their hulls. Each bay now opened, releasing swarms of smaller craft. Those aren't escape pods, Krall realized. They're fighters. Unmanned combat vessels, Dr. Taylor explained. Each carrier holds hundreds of them, controlled by pilots safely aboard the carrier. The small drone-like craft moved with incredible speed and precision. They swarmed around the Scourge ships like angry bees, firing targeted shots at vulnerable points. The Scourge responded by firing wildly, trying to hit the tiny attackers, but the drones were too fast and too numerous. For every one they destroyed, 10 more appeared. Chief Security Officer Ryan Jackson monitored the battle from a secure station. We're targeting their weapons systems first, then propulsion. Minimal casualties, maximum effectiveness. This was another aspect of human warfare that surprised Krall. The Cathari, like most galactic powers, focused on complete destruction of enemy vessels. The humans, instead, were systematically disabling the Scourge ships without necessarily destroying them. Why aren't you finishing them off? Krall asked. General Maria Rodriguez, commander of Earth's ground forces, answered. Because dead enemies can't provide intelligence. We want prisoners and intact technology. Within 2 hours, the tide of battle had completely turned. The drone swarms had disabled over half the Scourge fleet. The remaining enemy ships were attempting to retreat, but found themselves trapped by the strategically positioned carriers. On the Conclave observation vessels, alien representatives watched in amazement. What they had thought would be the quick destruction of a primitive species had turned into an overwhelming human victory. How did we miss this? One counselor asked. How did our surveys not detect these capabilities? The answer was simple. The humans had deliberately hidden their true strength, allowing the Conclave to underestimate them. While the 7 small ships traveled openly between stars, the massive carriers had remained disguised as mining operations, invisible in plain sight. As the battle continued, Krall received an urgent communication from the Conclave High Council. They had been watching the battle and had an immediate request. They wanted to know if the humans would be willing to share their drone technology. Krall looked at Nelson, embarrassment clear on his reptilian face. It seems the Conclave now has a different view of human capabilities. Nelson nodded. Funny how that works. The Scourge commander, realizing defeat was inevitable, attempted one final desperate move. Their command ship, a massive vessel at the center of their fleet, activated what appeared to be a self-destruct sequence. Energy buildup detected, reported a technician. If that ship blows, it'll take out everything within 1,000 kilometers, including our carriers. Nelson turned to Dr. Taylor. Time to test the gravity web? She nodded. It's ready, but untested at this scale. Do it, Nelson ordered. 4 of the carriers moved into position around the Scourge command ship. They activated a new weapon system that created a localized distortion in space. The Scourge vessel was caught in this field, unable to move or release its energy buildup. "What is that technology?" Kral asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Gravity manipulation," Dr. Taylor explained. "We can create a contained field that prevents energy from expanding. The explosion will be trapped inside." The Scourge ship detonated, but just as Dr. Taylor had predicted, the explosion was contained within the gravity web. When the blinding light faded, nothing remained of the command ship but scattered debris. With their leader destroyed and most of their fleet disabled, the remaining Scourge ship surrendered. It was a complete victory for humanity. In the aftermath, the Conclave ships approached the human carriers with newfound respect. What they had dismissed as a primitive fleet of 7 small vessels had revealed itself to be a highly advanced force with technology that, in some areas, surpassed their own. Ambassador Susan Wright was flooded with messages from Conclave species, suddenly eager to establish trade and diplomatic relations with Earth. The same representatives who had laughed at humans were now requesting meetings and proposing alliances. As Kral prepared to return to the Conclave with news of the battle, he stopped to speak with Admiral Nelson one last time. "I owe you an apology," the Cathari said formally. "We judged your species too quickly." Nelson accepted the gesture with a nod. "A common mistake. People tend to equate size with strength. Humans learned long ago that's not always true. The Conclave will want to know how a new species developed such advanced technology," Kral said. "Tell them the truth," Nelson replied. "We had to be clever because we started small. When you can't rely on size or numbers, you have to innovate." As Kral's ship departed, Nelson joined Captain Martinez on the observation deck. They watched the Scourge prisoners being transferred to secure facilities. "Protocol Trojan Horse worked perfectly," Olivia said. "The question is, what's next?" Nelson looked out at the stars that had once seemed so distant and were now humanity's neighborhood. "Phase 5, he said, "taking our proper place in the galaxy." 1 month after the defeat of the Scourge fleet, the Grand Hall of the Conclave was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 24 member species had gathered for what many were calling a historic session. At the center of attention stood Ambassador Susan Wright, flanked by Admiral Nelson and Captain Olivia Martinez. The atmosphere was completely different from the first time humans had entered this chamber. Where once there had been mockery and dismissal, now there was careful respect and undisguised curiosity. Counselor Zriek called the session to order. "We gather today to discuss the formal status of Earth within the Conclave, following their unprecedented defense against the Scourge invasion." Kral, who had once been humanity's loudest critic, rose to speak. "The Cathari Empire acknowledges the tactical brilliance and technological advancement demonstrated by the humans. We propose that Earth be granted senior membership status immediately." Murmurs filled the hall. Senior membership was usually granted only after centuries of participation in Conclave affairs. No species had ever been elevated so quickly. "The humans deceived us," objected a gaseous being that floated in a containment field. "They hid their true capabilities." "Did we ever ask them to reveal everything?" Zriek countered. "Or did we simply assume they were primitive based on what little we chose to see?" Ambassador Wright stepped forward. "Earth never lied to the Conclave. We stated we had 7 interstellar vessels, which was true. We were not asked about carriers, drones, or defense platforms." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The recent Scourge attacks had frightened many Conclave members, and humanity had proven themselves to be powerful allies. By the end of the day, Earth was granted senior membership, with all associated privileges, including a seat on the Inner Council. As the session ended, representatives from various species approached the humans, eager to establish better relations. Many offered trade deals, technological exchanges, and military alliances. Kral approached Admiral Nelson directly. "Our military academy would be honored if human officers would consider teaching some classes on tactical innovation." Nelson smiled. "We'd be happy to set that up. And perhaps some of your officers would like to visit our training facilities as well." In the following weeks, a new treaty was signed. Earth's assigned sector was expanded to include several resource-rich star systems, and human ships were granted unrestricted travel rights throughout conclave space. Newly appointed Counselor Barbara Price, Earth's representative to the Inner Council, worked tirelessly to strengthen humanity's position. With her background in international diplomacy, she navigated the complex web of alien politics with remarkable skill. The key, she explained to Admiral Nelson during a private meeting, is to never let them forget what we can do without ever seeming threatening. Nelson nodded. A delicate balance. Exactly, Barbara agreed. We want to be valued allies, not feared conquerors. This philosophy guided Earth's new role in galactic politics. When several smaller conclave members requested human assistance with their own defensive systems, Director Eric Johnson was assigned to head the Joint Human Conclave Defensive Initiative. Eric, a veteran of Earth's early space program, approached the task with enthusiasm. We need to share enough to be helpful, while still maintaining our technological edge, he told his team. Remember, today's allies could be tomorrow's competitors. The humans also took steps to explain their military philosophy to curious alien species. Professor Alan Murphy, a historian specializing in human warfare, gave lectures that were attended by representatives from across the galaxy. Earth's history is filled with conflict, Alan explained to a packed auditorium. For thousands of years, humans fought each other. It was terrible, but it taught us important lessons. When resources are limited, innovation becomes essential. When you're outnumbered, you learn to be smarter, faster, and more unpredictable. Many alien species found this concept difficult to grasp. The Cathari, for example, had evolved as apex predators and relied primarily on overwhelming force in their military strategy. The idea of a smaller force defeating a larger one through superior tactics was revolutionary to them. Krall attended several of these lectures, fascinated by human history. Your species turned its greatest weakness into its greatest strength, he remarked to Captain Martinez after one session. Olivia nodded. We had no choice. Earth has always had limited resources compared to what we now see in the wider galaxy. We couldn't build the biggest ships, so we built the smartest ones instead. This reality was demonstrated when alien delegates visited Earth's shipyards. They were impressed not by the size of the facilities, but by their efficiency and innovation. Human vessels were being constructed with integrated systems that many conclave engineers had never even considered possible. Your ships are smaller because every cubic meter serves multiple purposes, one alien engineer observed with admiration. There's no wasted space. Admiral Nelson gave a tour to several high-ranking conclave officials. We don't build our ships to look impressive, he explained as they walked through a construction bay. We build them to win. 6 months after the Scourge defeat, long-range sensors detected another, even larger enemy fleet assembling at the edge of known space. This time, the conclave response was immediate and unified. A joint defense force was formed, with human officers in many key positions. The 7 human carriers, no longer hidden, were joined by hundreds of conclave vessels. In an impressive display of galactic cooperation, the battle that followed was brief but decisive. The Scourge, facing the combined might of the conclave led by human tactical guidance, retreated after losing nearly a third of their fleet. In the aftermath, a ceremony was held aboard the Pathfinder to celebrate the victory. Representatives from all conclave species raised glasses in a toast to their successful alliance. Krall approached Olivia during the celebration. I remember when I first saw this ship, he said, looking around the Pathfinder's bridge. I thought it was primitive and weak. And now? Olivia asked. Now I understand that appearances can be deceiving, Krall admitted. The smallest blade can be the sharpest. Later that evening, Admiral Nelson and Captain Martinez stood together at the observation deck, looking out at the combined fleet floating in formation around them. Conclave ships of all sizes and designs surrounded the human vessels in a display of unity. They're not laughing anymore, Olivia said quietly. Nelson nodded. No. Now we have to show them we're not just good at winning wars. We're also good at keeping the peace. Olivia smiled. That's always been the harder part. True, Nelson agreed. But if there's one thing humans have always been good at, it's adapting to new challenges. As they watched, a message came through from Earth. The Conclave had unanimously voted to establish its new military academy on a planet in human space. The first class would include cadets from all 25 member species, including the newly admitted humans. "It's a whole new galaxy out there," Nelson said, looking at the stars beyond the fleet. "And humanity is finally taking its place in it." "Not bad for a tiny fleet," Olivia replied with a smile. The end.